Good morning and welcome back to TCS Plus. I'm James Erasmus and I'm honored to have on the show again, Anna Collard. Anna Collard is a Senior Vice President and Evangelist for Content and Strategy at KnowBe4 Africa. And we're thrilled to have her here because she's got huge amounts of insights into the industry, the market, and quite specifically cybersecurity. Today, the two of us are going to have a really informal conversation about the state of the industry and importantly talk about some of the skills required in order to upskill and protect one's organization against the impending threats. And I thank you very, very much for being with us today.
Thanks, James. Hi, good to be here again.
It's lovely to have you here. Now, on our last conversation, we spoke about being mindful in security. And that begged a lot of questions, and I think quite a few people raised some eyebrows as to what we really meant. And I know what it means, and you know what it means, and the listeners and readers of our TechCentral show, and those who listen to that podcast will understand that you sometimes just need to take a deep breath and sit back and observe your horizon, observe the scenario, and take into context what's around you. And you can't do that when in fight or flight.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually feel that, taking into account emerging technologies and what's happening with AI and all that buzz, that's something that's becoming more and more important even, because it's a skill that will help us to, be present and be sort of critical or questioning of things that we are exposed to. And unfortunately, the way things are going, you have to be sort of questioning everything that you see. And you can't trust things even though they might look legitimate or sound legitimate. And that's where this, let's call it this mindful approach makes a lot of sense, because it gives us that pause between, let's call it the stimuli and the reaction. And a lot of the times, if we talk about cybersecurity, the way criminals social engineer us or hack us is by activating or triggering our emotions. And what happens is when you get triggered or when you're emotional, we all know that, this could also be in traffic or,
Sure.
People make us react. We don't act critically anymore. Like what happens is that our sort of executive functioning, the prefrontal cortex gets hijacked and we act like an animal sometimes, quite instinctively. And that's not necessarily, it can sometimes be helpful, if you need to react very quickly in a dangerous situation, if you have to run away from a lion or something. But in reality, in today's lives, those situations don't, we don't come across a lot of lions anymore, even though, Americans still ask me that when they say you live in South Africa. But the reality is that the stresses we're faced with in modern lives, what happens is they activate the same sort of fight and flight response in our bodies that hijack our critical thinking. And that then results in us sometimes, making decisions that may not actually be in our favor. And that's exactly where these social engineers come in. They try and expose us to information that's emotionally triggering. And then, and a good example, by the way, that I'd like to mention here is this awful grandparent scam.
Yes.
Where they use generative AI. And, the scary thing is you really only need 3 seconds of somebody's voice. So they get your voice from somewhere. Maybe they just give you a call and then say, oh, sorry, I got the wrong number. They've got 3 seconds of your voice. And then they can use that to generate anything they want, And then the grandparent scam, what they do is they use obviously a grandchild's voice to then call the family members to say, I'm in distress. I need your help. Please pay. And then obviously if you're a mother or a grandmother or father, if you hear your kid being in distress, you want to help. Your emotions are triggered. And unfortunately, with the advances in technology, it allows these scammers to make these messages so much more believable.
And a lot of what you're talking about has made me realize and think more about the importance of critical thinking, but planning your thought processes critically. Now, and just to reassure all of our international listeners, we do actually have lions here in South Africa. just not typically in our own backyards. We choose to create security features called large fences and eat the lions in the nature reserves. The threat potential that exists, the lions, have an intent and they have a capability. What we need to do is upskill and empower ourselves and our staff and the people around us, and indeed our family members, to actually be able to distinguish between a system and a human threat, and isolate those and react accordingly. So a lot of what you're talking about gave me some reason to research some tools that one might use. And they led to conversations around patching your system, fixing your fence, password hygiene, making sure there's a solid lock on the front door, multi-factor authentication, antivirus software, and actually, really importantly, and this is what you specialize in, is staying alert. And the alert piece is the critical thinking piece.
Yeah, exactly. And in some way, if we bring it back to that mindfulness approach again, when you feel something, use that as an alarm system. And I know a lot of people actually, particularly trauma survivors, it's difficult sometimes to understand that you're feeling an emotion. So if you can't name the emotion, by the way, naming and labeling something also takes the intensity of it away. So some people, they struggle with naming. They don't actually know that they're feeling anxiety or whatever it might be. So if you struggle with that, the next best thing is to be aware of what's happening in your body. So maybe your palms start to sweat, or your heart starts to race, or you just feel, some sort of sensation that makes you uncomfortable. And instead of giving into that could be a warning sign. Even in a positive way, if you feel excited, that's a warning sign. Maybe somebody's manipulating you, and
possibly subconscious, but it's a warning nonetheless.
Yes, and it sounds so easy, in theory, because that's really but it's a lifelong practice that we should all apply to not only be sort of safer in the online space and not fall for the social engineering attacks, but also to be calmer and happier people in normal life, right? And it's not that's easy. It's a lifelong practice to not react to your emotions and rather use them as like a, hey, there's an alarm bell. Something is happening here. Let me not just explode, but rather investigate.
And when looking to hire skills into your organization, you might say that there are some essential skills for that cybersecurity professional. Well, we're all actually cybersecurity professionals in our own right. How we practice it, how we go about implementing it is up to us. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in our job description. But a really important element of that professional's job makeup is not just their skills and qualifications around IT and security, by means of example, but also critical thinking. Being able to identify, can I clarify what that threat is? Am I questioning it properly? And that's your point, is do I have that EQ to identify that it is actually a threat?
Yeah, and look, let's be honest, like as a couple of years ago, it was so easy. You say, well, look at spelling mistakes, and if somebody from Nigeria offers you $5 million or whatever, then, it's sort of, okay, well, but nowadays, the sophistication of these attacks, particularly if you then also consider going, and I'm not actually just talking about, cyber criminals that want to steal your money, which is obviously that's what we should be most concerned about. But it's also, let's call them the more gray industry, the marketing industry, people trying to sell us something that we don't actually need, the misinformation, disinformation campaigns, all these conspiracy theories that are making the rounds, where even, yesterday I was forwarded something by someone who's highly intelligent, who I really respect, but he sent me a link to one of these conspiracy theory videos, and I'm like, how can you believe in that, And that's the thing, is that whether it's a hacking attack or cyber criminal trying to steal money from you, whether it's a phishing email, whether it's an Instagram targeted marketing advert that's trying to, again, like in my case, trying to get you to buy something you really don't need. We need to be more and more aware of that we are the product, that our emotions are being used as a, if you call it in the security world, like that's the vulnerability. And how do we patch that, And unfortunately, it's not a simple matter of looking for spelling mistakes anymore or hovering over the link. Like all the stuff that we used to train people on in the past, it's becoming more and more difficult because these attacks are becoming more sophisticated. So trying to teach people the technical ways of doing things is maybe, it's a non-point anymore because it is becoming so difficult. However, and this is where I think we are onto something if we use the mindfulness approach, is to say, well, anything that you're faced with, if it makes you feel something, rather take a breather, slow down, and then investigate it. If you're not sure, forward it to your IT department, ask them for help, or ask somebody else, call them back, not on the number that they give you, but the number that you have in your phone already, or like that you can look up. So that's the thing. It's actually, in a way, it's a good thing. We don't need to go, explain complicated things to, I don't know, like we used to in the past explain to people, look up the email headers. No, grandmothers don't know how to do that, and it's a moot point. Like, let's not try and explain people how to figure out the difference between a deep fake video and a real one, because it's difficult to do that, particularly as technology advances, and it is advancing so quickly at the moment. So the only thing we can go is really go back down to what you said, critical thinking, slowing down, just figuring out, well, I haven't expected this. Why would I get this now? Hey, my grandchild, if he or she is in distress, let me rather figure out where I can call him or her back. Let's not just give in, So those are the, I guess in a way it sounds simpler, but it is, as I mentioned before, it is something that's tricky to live every day, and it requires a practice to implement that mindfulness thinking.
And I think just from a practical perspective, we shouldn't be hesitant to be asking for help. We shouldn't be, scared to put our hands up and say, I'm not sure. Because the repercussion or the alternative is so much greater than the slight reputational damage you might have if you are to ask someone in IT whether an email from a strange address is legitimate or not. Surely the credibility is far greater for you having at least anticipated it as potentially being a threat.
Yeah, 100%. And in fact, if we talk about, what security teams, what they get measured on, when we talk about awareness and security culture, is people's vigilance. And how do you measure that? So the amount of times that you report something that you're not sure of is actually a positive metric. So what they measure, what they want to see over time is obviously people clicking less on phishing emails or phishing simulations. And what they want to see in time is that graph of people reporting things going up, because the more vigilant you are, and yes, sometimes it might just be something legitimate, but so what? You rather double check, rather be safe than sorry. And that's actually something that your IT department wants to see, and they get measured on. So the more you report things, the more they make their bonuses or KPIs.
And that's what it's all about. I made some notes about critical thinking, and there are effectively 6 steps to it. And I've already mentioned clarify, question, and identify. Now, that's about as far as I might be able to go as a lay person. The next step is analyze. And that's the job of the security professional. That's the job of our IT department. They can analyze it. Then the next is evaluate. And then the last is create. So analyze, evaluate, and create. Create being create a solution, a workaround, an alternative, create a blocker. And I think that's exactly to what you're saying is, let's help each other analyze what it is we're actually addressing.
Yeah, exactly.
And then maybe I can jump in and ask, what are some of the risks that you're seeing in the market at the moment? And, we talk about the global market, but, quite specifically here in South Africa.
So that grandparent scam that I just mentioned, I think for public awareness, it's really important to understand that it literally just takes 3 seconds for someone, an adversary to copy your or your loved one's voice and then use that to try and trick you. And let's face it, if you receive a message from someone that sounds exactly like your husband, your wife, your kid, whatever, your heart rate will go up. And again, that's where we are. Your heart rate is up. You're not thinking straight. You just want to help quickly, right? So that's something to be aware of. Deepfakes in general, I think also from a misinformation point of view, Russia is very active in, creating these polarizing messages. In fact, they've been there's been a whole campaign, not so much in South Africa, but in Africa against, the French government. So they've been actively pushing this conspiracy content and this, just call it this BS, right, on social media to get people to sway their or change their opinion about others. And that's just, in general, we have to be so careful that, or understand that when you read something on social media, wherever it might be, first of all, it's the longer you stay in these platforms, it's obviously in the platforms providers' interest, but then also if you slightly, show interest in a certain topic, even if the topic is controversial or whatever, you will get served more of that. So you get created, it's that whole bias echo chamber effect. So be so careful of the things that we believe in, because that's what they want, is they want us to be polarized. It doesn't actually matter about what the message is, as long as it's different to what somebody else's believes, and then that helps them to divide societies and create chaos. So whether it's a conspiracy theory, anti-vaxxing, whatever it might be, just be, again, mindful that there are higher powers behind that. They don't care about the content. They just care about making you believe something that is different to other people, so that they can create this divide and polarization. And that's really, really that worries me a lot. If we think about the future and where the world is at the moment overall, and there's so much already to be worried about. So, be careful what you believe in and stick to what you believe in, and don't let yourself
be discerning about what you click on and what you don't click on, because naturally it's gonna start filtering you and profiling you, and you may have one profile on, for instance, a social media channel like Facebook, and a different channel and a different profiles on a different channel, and that's all going to be targeted to the extent that you wonder how anybody in the world knew you as well as they do. And the person who wants to know you best is the cyber criminal who wants to, get behind your passwords.
Yeah, and the targeted advertisers. Not that it's all bad, right? I mean, we all appreciate if you get served something that you might be interested in. It's just the extent of it that sometimes, I find it scary sometimes how accurate, how good this is.
And do you think there's a bit of a cybersecurity lethargy creeping in? Do you think that organizations are starting to get a bit bored of this, not the topic as much as the fact that the threat exists, and we know we need to do something about it, but we've all done our compliance training. Why do we have to do it again? Or why do we have to do more of it? How are you addressing that fatigue?
I mean, yes, that definitely is a thing. Security awareness fatigue. I think it's a little bit like flossing. It's not something that you.
Sorry, Anna. We just cut out for a second. Riverside started squeaking. Sorry. I asked the question. If you mind just starting from where you started answering it, because that's where it started to get all fuzzy, which is around security training or security awareness fatigue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's definitely a thing, that people get fatigued about the same messages. And I mean, on the one hand side, it's important to be reminded. It's a little bit like flossing. You can't just do that the day before you go to the dentist. You should do this every day. However, and this is really something that, again, like coming back to this mindfulness topic, when you can provide a different approach to the same problem, it's a surprise effect. Nedbank, for example, they've just partnered with their HR corporate wellness department on a roadshow, and the security
Who was
team.
that?
Nedbank. So the security team was sort of tagging along at this corporate wellness roadshow where they offered like pre-screening and all the things that you would expect from a corporate wellness approach. But now the security was part of that, saying, hey, calm minds fight cybercrime, and come and try out some sort of mindfulness techniques. And users, or people they're used to these compliance messages now. They see a different angle to this, something that will benefit them personally, and they responded really positively. So the more creative we can be in providing the same message in a different way, that's surprising, that's personally relevant, something that might help parents to protect their children online, etc. Something that is maybe interesting. Everybody nowadays is this whole. That's why I say this generative AI is so disruptive, because not from a technology per se, even though it is that too, just because of the innovation, the pace of the innovation, but because it reached everyone, like every Dick and Harry is talking about generative AI. And that's another angle to teach people, well, what does it mean? Where there is. Something I find really fascinating, by the way, is this whole idea of multimodal generative AI, where you use different modalities, and how is that being used and abused again. And the scary thing is both Facebook and Google have already they've announced that they will use multimodal generative AI in their advertising campaigns. And what I mean with that is, you now have an intelligence that is better than any other salesperson, that will not only serve you content, which is what's been happening for years in social media already, but it will respond to the way you respond. So if I'm in a shop and there's a really good salesperson, that salesperson will interpret, analyze how I react, and then serve me things that it thinks is most effective, right? And now we have technology that will do that better than any other salesperson, because they look at our personality traits. They look at maybe in the future, even when we use VR, they use all the bio feedback markers to see, well, hey, that's where her eyes flickered, so she is excited, so let me just serve her more of that. And that sort of powerful persuasion tactics that are coming, or that are already there, I find that fascinating on the one hand side, because the power that's behind it. You can now really influence, manipulate, persuade people. So it's exciting, but it's also super scary,
Sure.
So teaching people about that, making people watch, like we did the social dilemma. Actually, the same guys, I don't know if you've seen it, they've released a talk called the AI dilemma.
I know, I haven't.
Yeah, it's quite good. Again, that's, I think, a new approach to helping people understand and navigating this technology minefield.
And you've actually just mentioned a new approach. A new approach is actually also to share amongst friends and family and colleagues things that are useful, things that are relevant, things that might just open up your mind,
Exactly.
give you a fresh perspective.
And it's also not all about scaring people and making people paranoid. That's unfortunately often the security dilemma that we have. But it's more sort of, okay, how can we embrace this new technology responsibly? Like, how can we use it and make use of it to help us, but at the same time, obviously, stay safe, be aware of the ethical challenges, etc.
Yeah. Well, Anna Collard, thank you very, very much for your time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation, as always. And I might just add that I think that using technology as an enabler is what TechCentral loves most. Making sure technology is on our side, using that enabler to protect ourselves is really what today is about, and critically thinking about our actions. And without the steadfast support from people like yourself and KnowBe4 Africa, giving us the insights, knowing where we can turn to when we need to look for the advice and guidance and the training and the skills development that you do so well across the spectrum, is very, very helpful to us, because it gives us that broader range and a larger capacity to protect ourselves from the marauding lions that are actually out there. So for me, James Erasmus at the TCS Plus show, thank you very, very much for joining us, and thank you, Anna.
Thank you, James. That was great. Thank you so much.
Please feel free to follow us at YouTube or directly through the TechCentral website and subscribe to our newsletter. And we very, very much look forward to many more conversations with Anna and KnowBe4 Africa.